Okay. So, the 24 assumes that you're a general securities principal, and there's going to be a financial and operations principal who is one of somebody you're supervising. So you're not going to be in charge of fiscal responsibility of the broker dealer, but it's important that you are going to be talking to somebody who is. And so you have to have a general understanding of fiscal responsibility. In the late 60s, we had a major crisis where a lot of broker dealers were insolvent and didn't even know it. And when they shut down the broker dealers, we couldn't find the customers' monies and securities. Embarrassing. And, we said, gee, those bankers are onto something. Those bankers have that sign out front that says FDIC that makes people feel warm and fuzzy about leaving their money at a bank. And we said, we need to come up with something like that. And so in 1970, we passed what's called the Securities Investor Protection Corporation Act, and it protects broker dealers or customers of broker dealers who get shut down. And so net capital is kind of what's behind the SIPC sign. It's the forensic accounting. What does the broker dealer look like dead? Not alive, dead, right? Because the idea here is a SIPC trustee, if you don't meet the fiscal responsibility rules you and I are going to be discussing, that a SIPC trustee is going to be appointed to liquidate the firm. And hopefully, if your FinOp has done this correctly, there should be no claim to SIPC. So we're going to be talking about the three standards of net capital. One standard is just a hard dollar amount. Very rarely does a broker dealer struggle because they can't come up with that hard dollar amount. The second is going to be aggregate indebtedness to net capital. That's what gets broker dealers into trouble. Well, we can owe customers and others. So we're going to be talking about that. And then a lot of us are going to support the broker dealer through what's called a subordinated loan. And we get a little concerned if too much of the net capital is in the form of a subordinated loan, because the idea here is you wouldn't be as good a steward if you're losing somebody else's money. So the three standards of net capital are going to be a hard dollar amount we're going to be discussing, an AI to net capital ratio we're going to be discussing, and debt to equity. My broker dealer, I had a subordinated loan, and the guy, when I paid him off, he said, well, J-Steen, you're paying me early. I say, I am. And he says, why? I said, I want to remove that third standard. I'm not going to have to worry about it. If I don't owe anybody any money, I only have to meet two things, the hard dollar amount and the AI to capital. So we're going to talk about how we report. We're going to be talking about focus reports. You don't need to know focus stands for fiscal, operational, combined, uniform, single report. Thank God. But we do have a focus report. Test question, you're not a FinOp. So you're not supposed to be signing a focus report. That's going to be your financial operations principal who signs that focus 2 or focus 2A. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about SIPC coverage. We'll talk about the Securities Information Center. And we'll talk about fidelity bonding, which is very testable as well. And we'll talk about record retention. So this is where we're going to find you some points, we hope, right? So what we're going to talk about first is the net capital requirements of a broker dealer. So if you didn't want to go through Wells Fargo Advisors, I think you made the right choice, by the way. But if you and your partners want to set up your own broker dealer, well, good news, you got a 24, and then one of your partners or yourself would have to go get a 27. I think it's a good deal, needless to say. So this would be what the broker dealer Wells Fargo advisor is going to need. So 1533-1 is called net capital. And, it's not net worth, because the net worth of a broker dealer, so we're looking at a balance sheet of a broker dealer, it's going to be assets minus liabilities equals net worth. Now, in a subordinated loan, we get to count that as part of our net capital. So, for example, when I went for my membership interview with FINRA, they said, Dean, for your net capital standard for your new broker dealer, we want to have 1 year's worth of expenses in a bank account. So we want you to show us a bank account with $500,000 in it. I go, wow. Geez, I thought it was going to be like $5,000 or 12 to 1, or basically it's whatever they tell you they need. I went to a guy, Bill, and I said, hey, Bill, I'm setting up this broker dealer. And as you know, part of the broker dealer, us founding this broker dealer, is to take care of some of your problems. So I'd like you to have some skin in the game. So what I'd like you to do is advance a subordinated loan of $250,000 to Gamma Global Investments. So I'm going to put up 250. He's going to put up 250. We have no debt. Now, on the balance sheet, that 250 sounds like it's a liability of my broker dealer, but subordinated means Bill has said this $250,000 is available to customers if we get shut down. And that's why we're counting that as equity. We get to count it because it's subordinated to the customers of the broker dealer. So in my example, we have no debt. We have net worth of 250, a subordinate lien of 250. So we have 500 grand. Non-allowable assets. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I understood. I understand.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we're going to talk about, the parameters of all these things, right? Non-allowable assets are pretty, I think, easy to understand in this regard. A SIPC trustee doesn't want to deal with certain things. If a SIPC trustee liquidates the firm, all they want to deal with is cash and securities. So if it isn't cash, it isn't securities, it does not count.
Right.
So that's basically anything that isn't cash and securities. Tentative is very important because that means before we take haircuts. Now, you're not going to be taking haircuts because you're not a FinOp. But, if the SIPC trustee shuts down our firm, it has to sell the securities. It might be a bad day. And so we say, you say you got $1 million in inventory, cash and securities. Let's call that 850 grand just to give us a margin of safety. When I bought some raw land, and I was going to build a house. The bank said, Dean, for purposes of the loan, the haircut on the raw land is 100%. We're not even going to count that as part of the collateral for the loan. It gives us a margin of safety, Dean, if we have to foreclose. So we're not counting the 10 acres. We're saying the 10 acres are worthless. Yeah, not really, but I get the idea here. We'll talk about our basic haircuts, and the haircuts you take are going to be based on the liquidity of the security. And when we get that all done, that equals our net capital. As I said, then we have to meet a certain number, depending on the type of business. It's kind of like a bank again. The type of net capital that JP Morgan needs is going to be different than what a regional, retail bank needs. Your net capital is going to be based on the scope of your business. All right, so very testable, subordinated loan. The minimum term is 1 year. So I say, Bill, if you put that 250 grand into this broker dealer as a subordinated loan, the minimum term is going to be 1 year. The agreement must be in writing. It has to be for a specified amount, and the copy has to be filed with FINRA 10 days prior to the proposed effective date. So they want to see that subordinated loan. It's not testable, but until I get this approved, it actually counts as part of my aggregate indebtedness, and God knows I don't want to have that happen. Now, we might want to pledge securities instead of cash. George, one of my favorite broker dealers, no longer around, was liquidated, not because they had any problems, they didn't, but it was called Llama Securities. And it was in Bentonville, Arkansas. And the 24 at Llama Securities used to be a broker at Smith Barney. And her last name is Walton, Alice Walton. Decided to set up her own broker dealer. Why not? Now, if I had to guess what a large amount of the net capital of Llama Security consists of, I would assume that's a secured demand note agreement where she's pledging Walmart stock as the form of the loan.
Right.
The FINRA that if we liquidate Llama Securities, that Walmart stock can be sold to pay off the customers. So that's just all the secured demand note agreement is a subordinated loan in the form of securities rather than cash. Note amount is set by the collateral value of the underlying securities. If the collateral value declines sharply, we have to notify FINRA. So, my first broker dealer I worked for, a large part of our net capital was a secured demand note agreement, a subordinate loan in the form of securities from Mr. K. Mr. K is your son-in-law is our guy running the firm, and same as kind of Alice Walton's situation. He was a broker, and he went to Dad and said, "Hey, Dad, I want to start my own place. I'm going to need some net capital. Would you be willing to put some money in?" And he said, "Well, can I put securities in instead of money?" And we say, absolutely, absolutely. Our bankers get upset with this, But if we're a firm, a smaller firm, but hardly any of these firms, well, I'll just use San Francisco, where I spent most of my career. We had firms like Hambrick and Quist, and we had firms like Montgomery Securities, and we had firms like Roberts and Stevens. These are broker dealers, investment bankers, and a lot of times they go down to Silicon Valley and they lose deals. Not because they're any less competent, but Goldman Sachs or Morgan Stanley would step into the issuer and say, hey, you come with us, firm commitment. You don't have to worry about whether we're going to raise the money, because we're telling you that whatever securities we can't sell, we will buy personally. Wow. I think the best example of this would be the Facebook IPO. A lot of people forget, but that was, a wobbly kind of an IPO at 38. I joke IPO either stands for instant profit opportunity, or it's probably overpriced. And, Zuckerberg, they were asking him, he's not too concerned about this $38. He said, well, the reason I'm not concerned is because it has nothing to do with us. The way I understand a firm commitment underwriting, that stock is sold at 38. And I think he's correct. And the lead underwriter was Morgan Stanley, and Morgan Stanley ended up losing a couple $100 million. We don't expect that they're going to do that. They wouldn't have said 38 firm commitment unless they thought they can do that. Now, in our business, the term for a firm commitment underwriting is an open contractual commitment. So my example, the syndicate led by Morgan Stanley has an open contractual commitment to the issuer, Facebook, to give them $38 a share. Whatever we don't sell is going to go into inventory. James Gorman is now legendary CEO of Morgan Stanley, is leaving, and we got a new guy. Morgan Stanley has a new guy. I feel bad for him because I go, man, it's going to be hard to do better. But, Michael Grimes is the 24 in charge of tech banking at Morgan Stanley. And one of the issuers that he deals with is Tesla, SpaceX, Elon Musk.
Wow.
So when Elon wanted to buy Twitter, Morgan Stanley formed a syndicate to sell $10 billion worth of bonds on a firm commitment basis. They weren't able to sell the bonds. And so these banks, the syndicate still owns $3-4 billion worth of these bonds. So, the needless to say, the Roberts and Stevens, Morgan Stanley, or Hambrick and Quist, and, Montgomery get upset when they lose deals because we don't have enough net capital. And so I'll play FinOp. They come back from Silicon Valley and they say, Dean, damn it, we're tired of losing business. Where you did a bot deal, you figure it out. I say, okay, let's have a partners meeting. A lot of these arcane accounting rules come from the days when we were partnerships. The only partnership I still know left in our business of any size is Edward D. Jones. But, I say, partners, welcome to our partner meeting. Kudos to our corporate finance team. They won a big deal, and it's going to cause our aggregate indebtedness to go up, because basically whatever securities we don't sell are going to be inventory positions. And so I need to puff us up and make us look much bigger than we actually are for net capital purposes. I've taken the liberty of photocopying your statements of the monies and securities you have here and elsewhere. On the top of that, you'll see a temporary subordinated loan document. You say, well, geez, Dean, what am I doing? Am I at risk here? I go, absolutely. If during the context of this underwriting, it blows up, you're saying that your monies or securities are available to pay off customers. Now, corporate finance men and women love these things. They go, man, Dean, wish we would have known about these earlier. So I'm about to put the firm on financial steroids. Now, you could only use a temporary subordinated loan to restore, reduced by a haircut, an underwriting commitment, a firm commitment. You can't just whip these out. So, they're going to test you on when this would be appropriate, when it's not. So if I'm your FinOp, you're my 24, I say, hey, George, we're an early warning. You say, well, whip out one of those temporary things. I go, well, you must have missed that on your 24 test, George. We can't use temporary subordinated loans for anything other than underwritings, firm commitment underwritings. We'll talk about later, the haircut is going to be 30% on these, and that's why it's going to be, a problem, potentially net capitalized. Okay, so FinOp, corporate finance loves these things. They come back from Silicon Valley, go, Dean, we know the drill, man. Call the partners meeting. Let's do another one of those temporary things. Doesn't have to come from our partners, but it has to come from either a rich company parent It comes from somebody who's trustworthy, thinks that we're not going to blow up in the context of the underwriter, right? So we are allowed 3. That's a test question. So we're allowed 3 in a 12-month period. So, at that point, when I put test question on the slide, that just means that you could expect, by the way, this slide is very testable. I mean, almost everything on this slide is testable, but this is testable. And then remember, you can't use them for any other purpose than this. And it makes sense at the point where at 3, FINRA is saying, well, geez, you probably ought to go get some more permanent capital for your firm. At the point you're using these subordinated loans to conduct these underwritings, at that point, maybe you should go find some permanent capital, whether it's, equity or it's a permanent subordinated loan, whatever the case may be. The maximum duration for these things is 45 days. The copy filed with FINRA 10 days before the effective date. Now, again, we don't allow you, George, as you know, having gone into cave to slay the dragon, we don't allow you to run up the score, so to speak. So whenever there's 3 of a thing, they love the except format. All the following are true of temporary subordinated loans, except, right? And they're going to ask you to pull out of that something that isn't appropriate for the use of a temporary subordinated loan. Okay, so we're talking about net capital. We said the net capital of a broker-dealer can consist of subordinated debt, either a permanent or long-term subordinated loan that we count as net capital, or if we're doing underwritings, firm commitment underwritings, open contractual commitments, bought deals, because we wouldn't have a problem as best efforts, we can use temporary subordinated loans. We said we can only use these in underwritings. By the way, firm commitment underwritings, we can only allow 3 in a 12-month period. In other words, you can't get clever on the test like I do 3 in December and I do 3 in January for a total of 6, right? No, it's a 12-month period. And then we have to get them approved by FINRA before we actually count them. Non-allowable assets, I think, is pretty straightforward. Let's talk about this idea of illiquid securities. The term we use for illiquid securities are unregistered securities. Now, it doesn't really matter whether we can consider this to be 100% haircut or non-allowable, but it makes sense that it's unregistered because that means the SIPC trustee can't sell them. And this might be stock we got as compensation and underwriting. For example, I told you that Elon Musk is a very important customer of a Morgan Stanley because he represents issuers, Tesla, now Twitter, now X, and SpaceX. And so maybe Morgan Stanley underwrites some SpaceX securities as part of their compensation, accepts unregistered stock in SpaceX. It makes sense that that is non-allowable because we can't liquidate it, right? There's not a public marketplace for it, is the point. So, there's a lot of words. It's like a foreign language. And, in the old days, we would refer to this as red letter stock because it would have nasty legend on it that says stop transfer, right? Sometimes we refer to this as legend stock. The point is all this stock isn't freely transferable and therefore it's not allowable. Unsecured receivables be non-allowable, and then allowable, what we're left with basically here is going to be cash and securities. A lot of us, I joke about broker dealers, we like to lease things because, we don't want to tie up net capital in office buildings or things like that we don't get to count as part of our net capital. So, if you actually are buying a building or something, we go, wow, you must have a lot of net capital. And I had a guy kind of like you, he was saying, can I get a discounted price? And, he was starting a new firm and, I met him at his new location and I didn't have the heart to tell him that I don't think I'm going to do it because I don't think he's going to last because he just tied up all kinds of money in things that don't count. I'm like, and I mean, this furniture is awesome, but I don't think I would have tied up broker dealer capital on a French Louis XIV partner's desk. That's just, doesn't make sense. But all right, let's go through this balance sheet here. And as you can see, if it isn't cash, it isn't the securities, it doesn't count. Now, whatever goodwill you had is no longer there if we shut you down. Right. So, I mean, what is the Drexel Burnham Lambert, brand worth? Not a lot after they no longer are with us. Right. So it makes sense that we're not going to count that. I don't think I would memorize non-allowable assets of a broker dealer. I think what I would do is in my brain housing group say, okay, well, if it isn't cash, it isn't securities, it does not count. Now here, the inventory is tentative, right? That's not, we're going to have to take haircuts on that inventory. Because remember, the idea here is that if we get shut down, the SIPC trustee is going to be selling off the inventory. And they want to have a margin for safety when liquidating the firm. The margin of safety being the haircut that we're taking. So you say that is worth $15 million. I said, well, George, as your FinOp, I'm going to have to haircut that inventory. I might even have a discussion with you saying, hey, George, will you talk to our trading desk and tell them as much as possible to trade flat? Trade flat. What I'm saying is if we don't have that inventory, I don't have to take the haircuts. So, maybe, Goldman during the financial crisis, we had a phrase they kept tossing around all the time, let's get to zero. What they're trying to say is let's get to where our inventory is balanced so that we're not having to take haircuts and, doing that. All right. So the most common haircut on common stock is 15%. Again, this is recognition test question. I'm not going to make you take haircuts. I'm just going to ask you to recognize the haircuts. And the most common is 15%. Now, when we do an IPO and we can't sell it, remember an open contractual commitment, firm commitment, the stock we don't sell, does it go to, stock heaven? Is it up there with the puppies? No, it goes into our inventory. And now we got a potential problem that we have the stock at inventory, and the haircut for a inventory position as a result of an IPO is 30%. We'd have to take a greater haircut. My example, whatever Facebook stock, Facebook is a NASDAQ security, whatever we don't sell, we're going to take a 30% haircut on that. So I come to you and I say, hey, George, we make markets in this security. I say, yeah, you did pretty good. You look like you were par on trading securities, the bid and the ask and all that kind of stuff. And I'm a little concerned right now. And you say, well, I say, well, there's probably a lot of FinOps in this particular security, George, having the same discussion that I'm having with you right now about how our haircut is going to jump if there's less than enough market makers. Makes sense, because if there's less than 3 independent market makers and we get shut down, we know that when SIPC goes to liquidate, all these remaining market makers are going to drop the bid enormously. They're going to say, oh my God, SIPC's going to be dumping that stock onto the marketplace. Let's lower our bid now. And that haircut is going to be 40%. So we have 15, that's our basic. We have 30%, and we have 40%. Again, it's recognition. It's not practical application. I will tell you when there's practical application. P.S. I think one of the challenges of 24, I wish there were more practical application, because there's no interpretation of a practical application question like, market value maintenance and a margin account. I mean, it's just either you get it or you don't. Now, what do you think the haircut is if you're the only market maker? And remember, the idea on net capital is you get shut down, and now the SIPC trustee is going to sell off the assets to pay off the customers. And what they want to be dealing with is not your property, not your building, not your art collection. I mean, that's why this is pretty stringent. It's basically liquid net worth. And if we shut you down, the securities are worthless, right? If you're the only market maker and you get shut down, they're not going to be able to liquidate the security. And so therefore the haircut is 100%. Now, again, there wouldn't be any accounting difference between 100% and haircut and non-allowable. It would have the same effect in terms of net capital. I mean, my point is that they're not going to torment you on is it non-allowable or is it 100% haircut? That won't be available in the same answer set is what I'm saying.
Okay.
Yeah. So here's an example, just to give you an example of a haircut. Now, test prep vendors, Past Perfect and even Kaplan, do give you practice questions where they ask you to take haircuts. On the actual exam, you're supposed to say, I am not a FinOp. I am not a FinOp. I'm a general securities principal, but you're supposed to have a general understanding of what's happening backstage. You know, what is happening with your financial operations principal. Now, again, vocabulary is very important. Non-exempt. So what does the word exempt mean? So on this test, if we use the word exempt, we mean it is a government or a municipal security. So what the word non-exempt means on this test is that it is not a treasury bond, a treasury note. It is not a muni bond. So here we have tentative net capital, another important word, because that means before haircuts. That means when I'm taking a test question, it says tentative net capital. It means we have yet to take haircuts. So as we said, our basic haircut is going to be 15%. That is the most basic haircut we take on inventory positions. And so as a FinOp, we get worried again if we have more than one inventory position that exceeds 10% of our tentative net capital. I think of it here, it's kind of like a bank that makes such a large loan to one customer on one property that as that property goes under, the bank goes too. And so we're concerned about inventory positions that take up a large portion of our net capital. And what FINRA says is, okay, well, if you have an inventory position that exceeds 10% of your tentative net capital, you're going to have to take an additional haircut on the amount that exceeds. Only on the amount that exceeds. So I'm going to take my standard haircut. On the amount that exceeds, I'm going to take an additional haircut equal to 100% of the original. What does that mean in English? If my original haircut was 30% on the amount that exceeds, I take another 30. Here it's 15. So I'm going to take my standard haircut. So now we look and I say, okay, well, it doesn't count here. Even though that exceeds 10% of our tentative net capital, it is a what? Exempt security. And P.S., it makes sense because treasury bonds are very liquid. I mean, if I shut you down and I'm a SIPC trustee and all you have is treasury securities, I go, oh, this is going to be easy.
Yeah.
Easy peasy, right? So I'm not concerned about that. I'm not concerned about TBS. And the reason I'm not concerned about TBS is it doesn't exceed 10% of our tentative net capital. It looks like the inventory position that we have a issue with is the 80,000 XYZ. So I'm going to take my 15% haircut. There's my 15% of the 80. The amount that exceeds. So it's only on the amount that exceeds, I got to take the original. So the amount that exceeds 10% of my tentative net capital is 20 grand. So on the amount exceeds, I take an additional haircut. And that brings my total haircut to $15,000. Again, on the test, this is mainly recognition to have an idea of this undue concentration. Again, mainly recognition. What is undue concentration? A, B, C, D. I say undue concentration is when a broker-dealer has 10% of its net tentative net capital in a single non-exempt inventory position. That's the recognition part. Or I'll say, when a broker-dealer has an inventory position that exceeds 10% of tentative net capital, which of the following statements are true? And then you got to come up with a statement that says they have to take an additional haircut on the amount that exceeds. So again, I don't think I'm going to ask you to do what I just did here. It's mainly the recognition of what is it, undue concentration. There's our definition. And if that is a situation that exists, what do we have to do? We have to take an additional haircut on the amount that exceeds. Again, we don't have to take, another hair, the whole thing. We're only getting penalized on this 20 grand here that is over. All right. Any questions on this undue concentration?
No, I understand.
Okay. All right. So I told you very rarely does a firm struggle because they can't meet the 5 grand or the 25 grand or the 50 grand or the 100 grand or the 250 grand hard dollar net capital number. Where broker dealers struggle is with what they can owe customers and others. I think of aggregate indebtedness as what the broker dealer can owe customers and others. So that's what that's about. So, when you think about it, I think the most common version of this would be, to say that Schwab has $4 trillion in customer assets is really to say that Schwab has $4 trillion in aggregate indebtedness. Because those monies and securities don't belong to Schwab, they belong to the Schwab customers. Now, Schwab has no problem meeting the $250,000 for a clearing broker dealer. But boy, if we divide $4 trillion by 15, oh my God. Every time somebody opens an account and sends in 100 grand, it causes aggregate indebtedness to go up because, again, that 100,000 that the customer just sent us is customer cash. I think the most obvious liability is what we call credit balances of customers. That's the cash laying around. I think, George, it's nice that you have Wells Fargo advisors as your kind of thing. Because, I might worry about George, but I don't worry about Wells Fargo having the money.
Right.
Right. I used to say, listen, I can't steal, George, what I don't touch, and I don't touch your monies or securities. So at Gamma Global, I'm not the one who's at risk. I mean, we use a clearing firm, so we'll be talking about that. Anyways, AI represents certain liabilities of the firm, not subordinated debt. It makes sense it's not subordinated debt because remember, the subordinated lender said that their claim would be subordinated to paying off the customers. So that's why we get to count it. It's the ratio that's most important for the exam. So as a first-year firm, do you recall what that AI to net capital number is for a first-year firm?
8-to-1.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. And do you remember what it is for an established firm?
15-to-1.
Excellent. This is embarrassing, but, Michelle, who works for me, is studying for her 27. And she said, she's not the FinOp, I am. And she says, Dean, I just made notice that we're in violation of net capital. I said, well, geez, Michelle, I mean, I get that if you were the 27, you're supposed to tell the regulators that we're in violation of net capital before you tell me. The idea being I'm going to talk you out of it. But, I pay pretty close attention to our balance sheet. I'm surprised. I mean, I usually pay, enough attention to this that I don't think that's correct. But let's just go over this quickly. And I said, Michelle, you realize that you use the first year template in your laptop, and we are not a first year firm. So yes, if we were a first year firm, we would be in violation of net capital, but we're not. I said, so first thing, would you please delete that template? There's no need for that to be floating around in your laptop because it's not something. And it's pretty embarrassing. Now I got to call everybody and say, we're not actually in violation of net capital. It's embarrassing because I teach 27 and the FinReg, I said, it's embarrassing. They said, well, Dean, instead of finding focus quarterly and tell me here differently, let's see it monthly. I go, I don't blame you. That makes sense. Right. So there's our two that we're held accountable for. Increasing the aggregate indebtedness increases the firm's minimum debt capital. So the idea here again is aggregate indebtedness naturally goes up in the course of expanding our business, right? Because we're opening new accounts. So, if you close a customer and he says, hey, George, I want you to manage some money for me. Here's $1 million. Let's put this to work. And then you send it to the broker dealer. The broker dealer's aggregate indebtedness just went up $1 million because that is not Wells Fargo advisors' cash. That is the customer's cash, right? So that makes sense that every time we do that, it's causing the AI to go up. For an established carrying firm, the minimum is the greater of 250 grand. Again, very rarely does a broker dealer struggle with 250 grand. Or, and this is where it gets broker dealers into trouble, $1 in net capital can support $15 in aggregate indebtedness, what we owe the customers and others. So here's a firm, by the way, I use the language as a crutch. And so what I mean is every time our time together, George, is a buffet. If you like something, take it. If you don't, then leave it. But every time I hear aggregate indebtedness, I'm going to in my mind go, what the broker dealer owes customers and others. That's what that is, liabilities of the broker dealer.
Okay.
if I owe customers and others $6 million, by the way, the only other not included in that is our subordinated lender. And again, I think it's very low probability the bank on the mortgage if we own property. Because if I'm a SIPC trustee and the broker dealer, gets shut down, the bank calls me. I go, "What do you normally do when people don't pay? You foreclose. We'll come get it." I'm not here to protect you. So here, when we divide the 6 million, we say by the 15, we need 400. Now, an important concept is you always have to rise and meet the highest number. So whenever we're doing that capital, in other words, if we would have done this and it came up at 200, you would still need 250. So you have to rise to meet the greater standard when there's more than one. We said there's 3 standards. There's a hard dollar amount, there's an AI to net capital number, and if we have a subordinated loan, our third is going to be debt to equity. The most egregious sin you can make in fiscal responsibility is violating net capital, and there are 3 ways to do it. One way is to be below 250 in this scenario. If it's a hard dollar amount, or be below 400 in this scenario, or the debt to equity. Okay, so differing amounts of net capital based on the amount of risk you present to your customer. Again, memory work here. If you're introducing your customers to a clearing firm, 2 big clearing firms are Pershing, another big clearing firm is National Financial. That's a unit of Fidelity. And I say, "George, I don't hear at Gamma Global Investments, I don't have an order department that transmits orders to the appropriate market center for execution. I don't hear at Gamma Global Investments have a purchase and sales department that generates confirmations. I don't have a margin department that determines whether monies or securities are due on your account. And I don't have a cashiering department. Because those are the departments we need to clear a trade. I am not a clearing broker dealer. I have a clearing broker dealer, George, that I'm going to introduce you to. Gamma Global Investments is introduced to National Financial or Pershing. And that will be transparent on your account statements that you're going to receive. Now, George, I've told FINRA that I'm not going to accept customers' funds and securities for prompt forwarding to the customer or to the clearing firm. And that's why my net capital is very low. If I said, "Hey, George, come on down," every night I have an overnight package going to the clearing firm. So come down and have a cup of coffee, and I'll be responsible for getting your monies and securities to my clearing firm. So introducing broker dealers, funds only subscription, wire order. What does wire order mean? Wire order means all I sell is mutual funds by subscription. I do it the old fashioned way. I sell mutual funds and I say, what I'm going to do, George, is put this check payable to Franklin Fund Distributors, 100 grand, into an envelope. I'm sending it off to Franklin Templeton Fund Distributors, San Mateo, California. That's a mutual fund by application. And you say, "Well, Dean, how many shares am I going to get?" I said, "Well, George, I don't know, because in a mutual fund, we're always doing business based on the next calculation of the NAV. And so U.S. Postal Service being what it is, I don't know. They get into San Mateo on a Thursday, and then they do the next calculation of the NAV. I don't know." You say, "Well, Dean, is there a way to speed that up?" I might say, "No, George, I told FINRA that I'm only doing mutual funds by subscription by application. So no, there is no way to speed that up." And George, therefore, my net capital is pretty low because I don't present much risk to you. I mean, the check isn't made payable to my broker dealer. The check is made payable to the mutual fund sponsor or distributor or underwriter. Period, full stop. Or I say, "Yes, George, as a matter of fact, instead of making that check payable to 100,000 to Franklin Templeton Fund Distributors, you can make that check payable to Gamma Global Investments. And I'll put that in my account and I'll wire it to San Mateo for you." Please note, the risk to you, George, just went up because you're now making a check payable to what? My broker dealer. And you're taking the chance that the wire never hit San Mateo. Right? I don't think George Dean is going bad for 100 grand. I don't know what my number is. You could see if this is like $10 million or some crazy thing. Then, then I get him, maybe Dean gets a little wobbly. So now the number goes to 25. Clearing firms, 250. Prime broker dealers. So a prime broker dealer, I say, George, I am not monogamous with who I do business with as a hedge fund. My hedge fund is always looking for great trading ideas. There is no monopoly on good ideas. And so I'll tell you what, George, if you have a good idea for me, I'll execute to your broker dealer so you can get your commission, your markup, or markdown. However, I am monogamous with who provides me with custody and financing. My prime broker is Goldman Sachs. So I want you to settle up with Goldman Sachs. Now, if I'm offering prime brokerage services to institutional investors like hedge funds, my net capital number is going to be $1.5 million. And what does a prime broker do? A prime broker provides custody and financing to institutional investors, primarily hedge funds. If I'm an executing broker dealer, it's $1 million. Now, remember, if I'm in all these businesses, Goldman Sachs is a clearing firm. Goldman Sachs holds itself out as a prime broker for hedge funds, and Goldman Sachs executes trades for customers. So do they need 250? Do they need $1.5 million, or do they need $1 million?
Sorry, I was thinking of something else. I'm sorry, you were asking me.
I was saying Goldman Sachs is in all three of these business lines.
Mm-hmm. So they're going to need the greatest, 1.5.
There you go. Exactly right. Right. You got to rise and meet. Whenever you get a question about a broker dealer, you say, okay, they got to rise and meet whatever that highest standard is.
Yeah. I was thinking, can you go back one slide, please? So I was thinking in my head when you were asking that question, what's the difference? Remind me the difference between a clearing and executing.
Well,
the sole act, what they actually do.
Yeah,
right?
well, execution means I can actually transmit the order to NASDAQ or a NASDAQ market maker, or transmit the order to New York and execute the trade.
Yeah. All right.
And clearing means I just do back office stuff. Now, almost every clearing firm I know would also have execution capability.
Okay.
Maybe,
Understood.
maybe, again, it's a risk reward kind of trade-off. I mean, I think this is incredible personally. I mean, it's easier to be ethically squared away when you already have billions of dollars, but Fidelity does not accept payment for order flow from its customer order flow. Schwab receives $450–500 million in payment for order flow. So does Robinhood. Now, I could see a situation in which Fidelity, I just told you, their clearing firm is called National Financial, that they might say, George, we just think it could be a potential conflict of interest for us to be executing trades. And so we use a third parties to do that. And we use, George, whoever we think can get you the best execution. So at Fidelity, we don't actually, even though we clear trades, we don't actually execute them. And then, I guess the good news, George, is, if I'm just going to carry on with this hypothetical, and George, we have multiple firms that execute for us. And if any one of them lets us down, we're going to put them in the penalty box. It's going to be hard for me to put my own self in the penalty box if I'm both clearing and execution. Now, by the way, if you were, an institutional customer, these things would be important questions for somebody to answer. We do have what's called a client relationship summary, where we disclose to customers potential conflicts of interest. And, I could very easily consider it to be a conflict of interest. Or, by the way, most conflicts of interest just need to be disclosed. And so I say, hey, George, I just want to disclose to you that I am a clearing firm and as well as an executing firm, and I'm going to be executing through my own, plumbing, using my own plumbing, and that could be a conflict. I would still always have, by the way, best execution obligation, meaning that, I have to make sure I'm, acting in my client's best interest. All right, so market makers. This is very testable. I don't know if this is helpful, but I think of this as a floor and a ceiling.
Yep.
a floor, and a ceiling. And then remember, whatever many lines of business we're in, that's what we have to rise and meet. So again, if I'm a clearing firm that also makes markets, for example, Merrill Lynch makes markets and securities. Merrill Lynch also does, firm commitment deals, it does clearing, it does all these things. So we always have to rise and meet the highest standard. So here's an example of very much kind of a test question. What they're going to do here on the test is either to put you under the floor or over the ceiling. So here's our net capital standards based on the number of stocks we make a market in. So for every stock we make a market in that's $5 or less, we're going to need $1,000 in net capital. For every stock we make a market in that has more than $5, it's $2,500 per. So let me give you an example. I'm going to give you the one here we have on the slide. But before I do, we make a market in one stock more than $5. One stock. We're only a market maker in one stock. Do we need $2,500? Do we need $100,000? Or do we need 102.5? We need 100,000. So first version of the question is we put you under the floor and you answer 100. The second version of this question, I give you some obnoxious amount of stocks we make markets in. And it's way over $1 million. You go, oh, okay, I'm going to hit the ceiling here at $1 million. Now, in this particular example, we're making markets in 20 stocks under 5. And we're making markets in 60 stocks over 5. So 1,000 per on the under 5, so 20, 2,500 for each stock over 5, so we need 170. Now remember, if we're a clearing firm, we need 250. We need 250. Now I gave you an example. I love this little game we're going to play here. I gave you an example of where I said, George, I've told FINRA that I'm not accepting customer funds and securities for prompt forwarding. Or, George, yes, I've told FINRA that I will take care of getting my customers' monies and securities to the clearing firm. I have, an overnight package every night going out to the clearing firm. So yeah, George, if you don't want to go to the office of the clearing firm, just come on down. Let's have a cup of coffee, chat a little bit. And, every night, 5 o'clock, we got an overnight package going out to the clearing firm. So if you receive customer securities for prompt forwarding to a clearing firm, if your net capital is 5, the answer is you can't do that. No. I say, George, I told FINRA I'm not going to do that. Now, as much as we try and explain this to customers sometimes don't get it. So if I love this word, be careful. There's lots of important words on the test. I call them pivot words, Inadvertently, and you receive customer funds and securities. And what that means is the customer didn't understand this discussion, which is, very likely. Well, then you're not going to be, held accountable for that. If that happens, and that circumstance is another key pivot word, isolated. Meaning there is no pattern. What I'm hinting at is if FINRA comes in and does, an inspection, and they find that this inadvertently has taken place, 3, 4, 5 times, they're going to say, well, George, I don't, I could get it if it was, a customer or 2 that didn't get it, but it seems like consistently these customers don't do it. And so now you're going to need 50 grand. They're going to bump you to the next level if you're doing that. Now, if the answer was yes, remember, then I'm going to need 50 grand. Best efforts underwritings. So at Gamma Global, George, all I did was best efforts underwritings. So, I had an issuer and they wanted to raise 5 million. And I said to the issuer, I said, at Gamma Global, we only do best efforts underwritings. It's not like I have $5 million laying around. I'm going to have to go find it for you. And, it might take us, 12 months to go find $5 million. He said, well, Dean, I have another broker who said they can just write me a check for $5 million. I go, well, that's called a firm commitment deal. And hey, God bless them. If they have $5 million of their own capital they want to risk and give you that 5 million and then go, try and sell the securities, God bless them. I can't do that. I can't do that because I told FINRA I'm only going to do best efforts underwritings. And by doing that, I don't have any risk to the customer. There's going to be an escrow account, and I'm going to put the money into an escrow account. And if we don't get to 5 million, I'm going to give everybody back their money. So I can get away with doing that with $5,000 in net cap. So if you want to do banking and you're an introducing broker dealer with 5 grand, you can do investment banking, but you can only do what? Best efforts deals.
That's efforts. Yeah.
And a $50,000 broker dealer can do banking, but again, they can only do best efforts deals.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yep.
Now, remember, in a firm commitment underwriting, ooh, a bought deal, we're acting in our dealer principal capacity. And I say, sorry, I can't manage a firm commitment underwriting. I can't even be involved in any firm commitment underwriting. So, even if I wanted to give you a check for 5 million, Mr. Issuer, I can't do it because, I told FINRA I'm not going to be doing firm commitment underwritings. And that's why I have a lower net capital standard. So both of these broker dealers cannot, by the way, these are called fully disclosed general securities broker dealers. They're conducting a general securities business in the secondary market as well as in the primary market. Now, selling group members are never liable for unsold securities. And again, we were looking at your printout and very impressive. What I mean by very impressive is usually people who are below par are usually packaged product persons, mutual fund men and women who really struggle in trading and banking. So, you were par at that area of the 24, which is usually not the case when somebody has missed. It's usually that. And you did pretty good on this, but remember, firm commitment underwriting is a bought deal. And even as a selling group member, a testable distinction, I cannot participate with 5,000 net capital. As a 50,000 broker dealer, I can participate in a firm commitment underwriting, but not as a syndicate member, only as a member of the selling group. So again, a testable distinction between a $5,000 broker dealer and a 50,000 broker dealer. Here are the two testable differences. The two testable differences are that a $5,000 broker dealer cannot receive customer funds and securities. A $50,000 broker dealer can. Or these are what we call introducing broker dealers. They're introducing the customers to the clearing firm. We also call them fully disclosed broker dealers. It's disclosed to the customer they're using a clearing firm. The other testable distinction is the $5,000 broker dealer cannot be involved in any way in a firm commitment underwriting, in no way. Whereas a $50,000 broker dealer can't be a syndicate member, they can join a syndicate member's selling group.
Okay. I've got a question here,
Sure,
Dean.
sure.
So in my notes, I've got a $50,000 introducing firm can participate in a firm commitment underwriting. Oh, as a seller. My bad.
As a selling group members.
Yeah. Okay.
Participants, right? This is not
Yep.
That's the key. All right, let's try
Okay.
a practice question. Let's try a practice question. We'll call it a day for this session. Okay, so here is a practice question. A member firm that does not hold customers cash and securities and introduces to a clearing firm must have a minimum net capital of.
Hey.
Right on. Remember, if they were prompt forwarding, it would have been into the C, right? So
Yeah.
All right, so we'll pick it up on this next session on the 57. I'll send you your video recording of the session when it becomes available sometime today. And I'll also I asked if you had this document. You said you do, but I'll send it to you again just so you have it, in a PDF so you can have it next session. Anything else you want to talk about in this session before we go?
No, no, I
Okay.
think it's good.
I think with George, we should be able to find you some points. I mean, did we want you to pass the first time? We did. We certainly did. But as a miss goes, as your tutor, I'm pretty happy with the miss, and I'm pretty happy with the way you missed it. I don't want people not to pass. Well, we want people to pass. When they don't pass, I like that we know exactly where we can find you the points, and it's in this section. Right?
Good. Okay. Yeah, I'm feeling good about where we're going. Thank you.
Good. Okay, so I'll see you for our next session. By the way, I like your little shirt. I love what is that? A blue, looks like you're a stylist.
I got a golf shirt on.
I like that. I like it. I like
Yeah.
that. What looks like almost like a paisley kind of a look. I haven't seen that.
Right, it is, yeah.
Mhm.
Got
All
some
right.
style.
Okay, I'll see you next time. I'll check as soon as we hang up. I'll check it just to make sure I know where you're at in my future. So
Okay,
okay.
great. Thank
And
you,
then
Dean.
remember, I'm going to give you I missed your email about can you get a package deal? So the package deal is I'm just going to give you a free hour. You can decide when you want to use it. We'll have to make sure it fits in the schedule that we can run over. If we already have something on the schedule and there's not somebody behind you, we can add
Yep.
30 minutes on 2 sessions or add an hour or whatever you want to do. We'll figure it out.
All right, great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Maybe you want to save it. I don't like, first do no harm, Hippocratic oath. So I don't want it to, do an hour with you the night before if it's going to scare you. But if you want to
No.
use it like, day or two out before the test and you got, a dean to-do list, maybe that's something you could consider too.
Yeah, I think that's where we go with it.
All right. All right. I'll see you next time, my friend.
Okay, thank you.